Good evening, friends. There was a time in my life when I didn't realize what was happening, but I was giving my power away, not to one person, not to one situation, but piece by piece, every time I allowed someone else's opinion to matter more than my own. Every time I stayed silent when I should have spoken. Every time I chose comfort over courage. Maybe you know that feeling, that quiet voice inside that says, "This isn't me, I was made for more." But I ignored it. I let circumstances dictate my worth. I let fear write my story. And I kept telling myself, one day I'll take back control. That day doesn't come on its own. You have to choose it. I learned that if you don't stand up and claim your life, the world will gladly script it for you. I reached a point where I looked in the mirror and said, no more. This is my life, my choices, my future. That's when the shift happened. I stopped waiting. I stopped apologizing for wanting more. And I stopped letting other people hold the pen to my story. Reclaiming control wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I began to guard my time, set boundaries, believe in possibilities greater than my past, and take small, consistent steps toward my own vision. And here's the truth. The power was never gone. It was always in me. I just had to stop giving it away. So today, I stand here not just as someone who struggled, but as someone who won back their freedom. And if I can reclaim my power, so can you. Because the world doesn't get better when you shrink. It gets better when you rise. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Your life matters. Don't give it away. Reclaim it, live it, own it. Thank you. There was a season in my life when I kept asking myself, why do I feel so drained? Why do I feel like no matter what I do, I'm always behind? At first, I blamed circumstances. I blamed people. I blamed the economy. I blamed everything outside of me. But the truth was harder to admit. The real reason I felt powerless was because I had been giving my power away, day after day, without even realizing it. It didn't happen all at once. It was subtle. It was in the small choices, the moments when I said yes when I really wanted to say no, the moments I let someone else's opinion decide whether I would step forward or step back, the moments I let criticism silence me or rejection define me. That's how power leaves you not stolen, but surrendered. I wasn't even aware of it happening because I thought I was being nice, polite, or realistic. But beneath those labels, I was shrinking myself. I discovered that every time I looked for approval from people who didn't even believe in me, I was handing over another piece of myself. I thought I needed their validation, their applause, their permission, but in reality, I was giving them control of my confidence. I was putting my self-worth in their hands and wondering why. I felt empty when they didn't deliver. Then I noticed how often I let circumstances dictate my mood. If things were going well, I felt strong. If life got tough, I felt small. My emotions were chained to what was happening around me, instead of being anchored in who I was inside. That meant I wasn't really living. I was reacting. I was tossed around by every wave of life. Powerless, because I had never learned to stand tall in the storm. It hit me one day that power is not always lost in dramatic moments. It's lost in quiet compromises. When you stay in a job that drains you because you're afraid of change. When you keep toxic friendships alive because you don't want to be alone. When you silence your ideas in a meeting because you fear judgment. Those small daily surrenders add up until one day you wake up and realize you're living someone else's life, not your own. That realization was both painful and liberating. Painful because I had to admit to myself that I was the one giving my power away. Liberating because if I was the one giving it away, then I could also be the one to take it back. But the first step was honesty. Facing the truth that I had been trading my power for approval, comfort, and fear of rejection. And until I owned that truth, nothing could change. One of the biggest ways I gave my power away was through silence. Not the silence of peace or reflection, but the silence of fear. There were countless times when I had something to say, an idea, an opinion, a truth burning inside me, but I swallowed it. I told myself, it's not the right time. They won't understand. Maybe I'm wrong. And each time I stayed quiet, I didn't just hold back words. I held back pieces of myself. I silenced myself in conversations where I should have set boundaries. Instead of saying, this doesn't work for me, I smiled and went along. I silenced myself in opportunities where I should have spoken with confidence. Instead of sharing my vision, I let others dominate the room. I silenced myself in relationships where my needs mattered. Instead of asking for what I truly deserve, I told myself, it's fine. Don't make waves. Every time I chose silence, I was teaching people how to treat me and teaching myself to accept less than I was worth. The worst part of self-silencing is that it becomes a habit. At first, you think it's just one moment, one conversation, one opportunity you're letting pass by. But soon it becomes your pattern. You convince yourself that silence equals safety. You start believing that avoiding conflict, avoiding rejection, avoiding judgment is the best way to survive. But what I didn't realize back then was that silence may protect you from discomfort in the moment, but it robs you of growth in the long run. I noticed how silence began to shape my identity. People saw me as agreeable, easygoing, even supportive, but deep inside I felt invisible. It's one thing to be quiet by choice, but it's another to be quiet because fear has tied your tongue. That's not peace, it's paralysis. And the more I held back, the harder it became to recognize my own voice. I started doubting whether what I had to say even mattered. What made this even more dangerous was that silence disguised itself as humility. I told myself, you're just being humble. You don't need the spotlight, let others shine. But humility is not hiding. Humility is strength under control, not silence under fear. I wasn't being humble. I was being invisible. And the more I mistook my silence for humility, the more I handed over my seat at the table. And here's what silence really cost me: missed opportunities. Opportunities to connect, to influence, to stand up for myself, to grow. Opportunities that would have stretched me, challenged me, and elevated me. Instead, I let them pass by because I thought my voice wasn't enough. Looking back, I realized I wasn't just losing opportunities, I was losing myself. Fear has a way of disguising itself as logic. I used to tell myself, I'm just being cautious. I'm just being practical. I'm just being wise. But in truth, those were excuses rooted in fear. Fear of failing, fear of looking foolish, fear of being rejected. So instead of taking steps toward my dreams, I stayed still. Instead of leaping, I hesitated. Fear wasn't just a passing emotion. It was the steering wheel of my life, and I had handed it the keys. I realized fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It whispered things like, you're not ready yet. You're not qualified. You're not enough. And because I listened, I postponed my future. I said, one day I'll try. One day I'll start. One day I'll be ready. But the truth is, one day is just fear in disguise. While I waited for confidence to show up, opportunities passed me by. While I waited to feel brave, fear kept me standing in the same spot. Year after year, fear shaped my decisions in subtle but powerful ways. I chose jobs that were safe, not fulfilling. I chose relationships that were comfortable, not empowering. I chose routines that kept me in the same cycle, instead of breaking new ground. Fear had me convinced that staying in the known, even if it was draining me, was better than stepping into the unknown where my true growth waited. I wasn't living. I was protecting myself from life. What's dangerous about fear is how convincing it can be. It tells you it's protecting you, when in reality, it's paralyzing you. I avoided challenges that could have built my character. I avoided risks that could have rewarded me with growth. I avoided speaking up, showing up, and standing out all because fear painted those things as threats instead of opportunities. Fear had me believing it was my shield, but in truth, it was my cage. And here's the thing about cages: the longer you stay in them, the more comfortable they feel. I became so used to letting fear guide me that it felt normal, safe, predictable. But normal doesn't always mean right. Predictable doesn't always mean fulfilling. I wasn't stuck because I lacked talent, resources, or opportunities. I was stuck because fear had convinced me to settle for less than what I was capable of. Looking back, I can see how many moments were stolen by fear. Moments when I could have taken a step forward, but chose to stay put. Moments when I could have spoken up, but stayed silent. Moments when I could have believed in myself, but believed the lies of fear instead. And every time I let fear win, I delayed the future I was meant to step into. Fear wasn't just an obstacle in my path, it was the path I was walking on. There comes a moment in life when running from yourself is no longer possible. For me, that moment happened standing in front of a mirror. I remember looking into my own eyes and realizing I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. The reflection was familiar, but the fire was gone. The confidence, the spark, the purpose, it had all been buried under excuses, fear, and the weight of playing small. I wasn't just looking at my reflection. I was looking at years of choices that had taken me away from who I really was. That mirror moment was uncomfortable. It forced me to stop blaming everyone else for where I was. I could no longer hide behind the story that circumstances, people, or luck had kept me down. The truth was right there in front of me. I had been the one holding myself back. And facing that truth was painful because it meant I couldn't play the victim anymore. The mirror doesn't lie. And in that raw moment, it showed me that the person responsible for my life was me. As I stood there, I felt the weight of all the times I had compromised, all the times I had silenced my voice, all the times I had chosen fear over faith. The mirror didn't just reflect my face, it reflected the choices I had made, the chances I didn't take, the dreams I had shelved. It was like holding a book where every chapter was written with hesitation instead of courage. And suddenly, I didn't want to keep reading the same story. That realization lit something inside me. I told myself, this ends today. No more giving away my power. No more waiting for someone to rescue me. No more pretending that I am less than what I know deep down I can be. It wasn't a loud declaration shouted to the world. It was a quiet vow whispered to myself. But sometimes the quietest promises carry the most power. The mirror became more than just glass. It became accountability. Every day I saw it, I was reminded that I could not escape myself, no matter what I told others, no matter what image I tried to project. I knew the truth when I looked into those eyes. And I knew that the only way forward was to honor the promise I made in that moment, to stop betraying myself and to start reclaiming my life. That was the day I decided to stop negotiating with excuses, to stop apologizing for wanting more, to stop accepting less than I deserved. The mirror showed me the cost of staying the same, and it was a price I was no longer willing to pay. Something shifted inside me, not because life suddenly got easier, but because I refused to keep running from the reflection staring back at me. For a long time, I waited for life to get better. I thought that maybe if I just kept going, something magical would happen. The right opportunity would fall into my lap. The right people would come along and lift me up. The perfect moment would arrive, and suddenly everything would change. But the truth I eventually had to face was this: waiting on chance is another way of giving away your power. Nothing changes until you decide. I had convinced myself that life was something that happened to me instead of something I could shape. I told myself, when the timing is right, I'll go for it. when I have more money, when I have more experience, when I feel more confident, that's when I'll start. But the timing was never perfect. The money was never enough. The confidence never came. The more I waited, the more I realized that life wasn't going to hand me control. I had to claim it for myself. Choice is what separates those who change their lives from those who remain stuck. I saw people with fewer resources, fewer opportunities, fewer advantages rise up and create lives of meaning and impact. And I asked myself, why not me? The answer was clear: because they chose to move, even when the odds weren't in their favor, while I was still waiting for the odds to change. I was living by chance while they were living by choice. The danger of relying on chance is that it keeps you passive. It makes you reactive instead of proactive. I realized that every time I said, maybe one day, I was pushing my dreams further away. Every time I waited for luck, I was giving my power to the calendar, to other people, to circumstances beyond my control. And the more I did that, the more powerless I felt, because my future depended on something outside of me instead of the decisions I could make today. The moment I understood this, everything shifted. I began to see that choosing even small choices was an act of reclaiming power, choosing to say no, choosing to say yes, choosing to take one step forward, even if I didn't know where the second step would lead. Those choices didn't erase fear, but they proved that I didn't have to live under its rule. Every choice became a declaration. I am no longer waiting for life to happen. I am happening to life. And here's what surprised me. Once I began making choices instead of waiting for chance, doors started opening. Not because luck suddenly appeared, but because choice created momentum. Momentum created opportunity, and opportunity created change. What I once thought would take chance or luck to accomplish, I discovered was always within reach. It was just waiting for me to decide. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was that not everyone deserves unlimited access to me. For years, I thought being available all the time made me a good friend, a good worker, a good person. If someone needed help, I dropped everything. If someone wanted my time, I gave it away. If someone disrespected me, I let it slide because I didn't want to cause tension. What I didn't realize was that every time I did that, I wasn't just giving my time, I was giving away my power. I began to notice how exhausted I was, not because I was working hard toward my own dreams, but because I was constantly pouring myself into everyone else's demands. I was saying yes to things I didn't want to do and saying no to myself in the process. I was allowing people to drain me emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually because I hadn't learned to draw the line. And here's the truth: when you don't set boundaries, people won't set them for you. They'll take as much as you allow. What I didn't understand at first was that boundaries are not walls, they're doors. Walls keep everything out. Boundaries, on the other hand, let the right things in and keep the wrong things out. By refusing to set them, I wasn't being kind. I was being careless with the one life I had been given. Every yes I gave to something meaningless was a no to something meaningful. Every time I gave away my energy to the wrong people or the wrong priorities, I robbed myself of the focus I needed to grow. The turning point came when I realized that my time is my life. Every hour I spend is an hour I will never get back. And if I continued to give away those hours carelessly, I would wake up one day full of regret. That realization made me start protecting my time like treasure, because that's exactly what it is. I stopped answering calls that drained me. I stopped explaining myself to people who weren't invested in my growth. I stopped letting guilt manipulate me into overextending myself. At first, setting boundaries felt selfish. I worried that people would think I had changed, that I was cold, or that I didn't care. But then I realized people who truly value you will respect your boundaries. The ones who resist are often the ones who benefited the most from you having none. And if someone walks away because I won't allow myself to be used, then they were never really for me in the first place. That truth gave me the courage to stand firm. What amazed me was how much clarity and peace I gained once I began setting boundaries. My energy returned, my focus sharpened, my confidence grew because I finally understood that saying no isn't rejection, it's direction. It's protecting space for the things, the people, and the dreams that truly matter. And for the first time, I wasn't just busy. I was intentional.